And we're live. It is Friday, August 6th, 2021, 5:03 p.m., and I am dripping with sweat from one of the more satisfying bits of manual labor I have done in a while. This afternoon, after my last meeting on behalf of the Lawfare Institute, I went to the hardware store and I bought a new chain for my chainsaw, my larger chainsaw. And I did this because I have discovered a remarkable fact about chainsaws that is the ultimate application of bougie first world problems kind of thinking to chainsaws and manual labor, which is that it is actually really cheap to buy a new chain for a chainsaw. And so all this time that I used to spend manually filing, sharpening a chainsaw blade with a file, now I just throw out the chainsaw blades and buy another one. So I went to the hardware store, bought a new chainsaw blade, and put it on the chainsaw and cut one slab of cherry wood off of my beautiful piece of cherry tree stump. And
was it like a knife through butter?
well, nothing is like a knife through butter with hardwoods.
Okay.
But it went through, and there is now a beautiful slab, the perfect shape of the stump, that is going to be one of the beds of the table. And it was immensely satisfying. So we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to have new chainsaw blades that actually can cut through a slab of cherry without kicking back and cutting your head into little pieces, and that's progress. So Scott, please introduce our guest.
Yes. By the way, I can I just say it was the first cut through. Was it noticeably easier? It was.
Unlike unlike a knife blade, a knife will still cut when it's dull. And when you're going through like a tomato, it's really the sharpness of the knife matters, because it's like how much does it push before it starts cutting, and does it squish it, right, or does it just cut it like butter? A chainsaw, when it's dull, will not cut anymore. And it will just rub, particularly hardwoods. You can cut softwood all day, but it will not actually go through it. It will just sit on it and spin and generate immense amounts of heat, and it'll eventually burn it. And so when a chainsaw is dull, it actually does not cut anymore, and you have to either sharpen it or remove the blade entirely.
I see. So it's, but I just want to know, it was satisfying.
Oh, it was really satisfying.
Oh, okay, that's
and
good.
And tomorrow I'm going to do another one, and I have like 3 beds of cherry wood that I'm creating for the 3 remaining slabs of this table, and it is and these are big. I mean, this slab is like the size of my torso, so it's like one cut just shaves off the surface of the stump, and it creates these very beautiful faces that are 2.5 feet long and 1.5 feet wide.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's do you, Laurin, before I introduce you, do you have a chainsaw, and do you use it?
So I'm really happy to talk about woodworking over cybersecurity. So I wouldn't talk about the chainsaw, but about a track saw I've recently acquired.
Oh, tell us about the track saw.
It is a
totally hijacking Scott's show
here. It is a Festool TS55, and then something with RBCQ or something like that. You'll find it on their site. It is a lovely piece of kit. It has these long tracks, so you can really kind of rip and cut very long pieces of wood. Much better than with a table saw, actually.
For audience members who don't know, a track saw is basically a handheld circular saw that is set onto a kind of like a runner, and you clamp the runner to a long piece of wood, and you can ripping is the hardest kind of cut to do, long cuts along the grain, and a nice track saw can take a very complicated piece of wood and do a rip down the center of it. I've never used one, but I've admired them.
I can only recommend it, particularly this one. It is extremely accurate. So it's really, you can set it up to like 0.5 degrees, and it will not do what a lot of them do, which is, the angles will not be perfect. I'll be posting the link for anyone interested. I can only recommend this saw to everyone who is interested.
Well, okay. I was really worried that we weren't going to talk about track saws today, so I feel I feel relieved. But we can continue talking about this, which will be of interest maybe to somebody,
members of the audience, but of extreme interest to the guest and me.
Right. Exactly. This is what we call in the law a discrete and insular minority. So I would say, Laurin Weissinger is a lecturer at the Fletcher School of, was it law, diplomacy and law? Is that it?
Yeah.
Diplomacy and law. And he's also law diplomacy. And he's also a visiting fellow, cyber fellow at Yale Law School. He was my cyber fellow, not last year, but 2 years previous, and Laurin reminded me that this is our third DEF CON Black Hat together. I thought it was our second, it was our third. And so the reason why I know Laurin was that when I first started learning about cybersecurity, we obviously like wanted to hire somebody who, had a law background and a tech background, and then after the first year, I was like, no, I just want a system administrator, somebody who just like knows how networks work. And then the ISP program at the Information Society project, they got like an application from somebody who really had nothing to do with law. It was like a systems administrator, but he had done DPhil in sociology at Oxford, and they were like, this is Scott's guy. So they sent it to me, and I was like, no law, that's the guy I want. But it was exactly one of the things. This is one of my first conversation with Laurin, and I was like, how do I learn how to hack? How do we teach students how to hack? Do you remember what your first thing you said to me was, Laurin?
So I'm wondering which conversation you mean.
The very first one
over the phone.
Yeah. So, by the way, I call up Laurin. I'm like the director of the Law and Philosophy Center. I want to hire you. It was like he was completely flummoxed. Like, what? He's a sociologist from Oxford who studies cybersecurity firms, and I was like the Law and Philosophy guy calling him up and he's like, "Do you know what I do?" And I was like, "Yes, I do know what you do." Well, actually, one of the things that Laurin taught me was like, if you want to learn about hacking, YouTube. You had to watch YouTube. And so he too was the one that turned me on to watching YouTube videos, like hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos, because that's like the way that you learn these things. But then also I would go with Laurin to various conferences, and he was like, Laurin's like, he's extremely smart and knowledgeable and has been doing this stuff for a very long time. So he would like be he was like my interpreter. So like I would turn to him and I'd say, what's this stand for? And he would whisper to me. So over the course of these conferences, he got me up to speed. And then we taught a course together with somebody else about how to hack. And so that's one of the things I wanted to talk about.
So, Scott, first of
Hey,
all,
Lauren.
Hi,
want you
James.
to-
How are you?
I
Good.
want you to
Long
notice
time. Nice to see you.
the quite extraordinary results of the poll that are coming in, and how well woodworking tools are doing, particularly relative to inclusive legal positivism. So, before you, declare that nobody could possibly be interested in a discussion of Lauren's track saw,
Okay.
Oh, wait.
I-
Hold on. Lauren has a track saw? Tell me
Yep.
everything, Lauren.
Okay.
No,
Guys.
it's actually really
Guys.
funny because I was on a run and then I paused as I was coming inside and took these photos for you, Ben, because there is literally a guy out on the street corner selling all of his sorry, it keeps flipping, but selling all of his tools. He has 3 miter saws and a grinder
Wow.
and a bunch of stuff, and I was like, oh, I should take these photos. He's selling for $10 each. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get them to Ben, but I bet Ben would be interested in
I'm
this.
pretty well stocked in the tools
But
department.
now I can pitch them to Lauren. is what
Yeah,
you're telling me.
Lauren wants the
Not
tools.
well stocked.
Guys,
So
let
let me know what's there.
Just one quick thing, guys. Can you text me when you guys want to go and talk about hacking again? And
Yes.
you
I just want
can-
to point out that this is the
you-
original hacking tool right here. This is a pair of bolt cutters.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Okay.
All right. So here is to return to the subject that we were talking about.
Sorry.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So, I'm sorry. Did you want to talk, or Ben, or was that way of bringing me back in?
It was a way of I was gonna fake that I was bringing you back in, but then actually ask a track song.
Okay.
This was sort of a bait and switch kind of move. But now it being a show with Scott, it becomes a meta bait and switch kind of move.
Right. Just make sure that it's not a HIPAA violation.
Right.
I mean, I like a good I like good fun like the rest of us. The HIPAA violations or something. Oh, by the way, this is Lauren just got his health network certification. So
Yeah.
So Lauren is certified as somebody who never violates HIPAA. So is that true?
Yes, absolutely. And it's also, we have to think about which HIPAA it is, right? The one that's like hippo with an A that you find on Twitter, or the actual law, which is spelled very differently. So the certification I did, and I worked in healthcare, information security and informatics for a long time, does deal with the HIPAA law more than what you will find on Twitter, and it comes with the lovely acronym of HCISPP, and it's sanctioned by ISC2, which is one of the kind of professional associations that deal with cybersecurity stuff. So I did that this summer because I had nothing better to do, obviously.
Right. So Lauren in his free time gets additional certifications, which I just want to say makes me look a little less weird. So I like that. So Lauren, so one of the things that I want to talk about our class together that we taught at the law school about how to hack. But I also want to mention that one of the things that Ben has talked to me about is about kind of recreating the course as a kind of a public course that would be hosted by Lawfare, but to do it in the way in which in lieu of fun is the show works. That is, we would actually have an audience, and we would teach them, and all the things that fail, because one of the things that we could talk about is that when we would do live things in class, because everything was like hands-on. Like things failed all the time, and it kind of, I thought having a class where, things were failing all the time would be less interesting than one in which would be edited. So I think it's such a good idea to have us teach like as squares, but then we'll see, when we bring the audience in, that it's actually a very participatory thing. So it, like, as opposed to having lectures where like a YouTube video and guys just talking at you, you have a kind of interaction between the people teaching the course, us, and the members of the audience. So anyway, I think that's such a cool and interesting idea that Ben had, and that would be
and you could use share your screen really effectively in that context.
Right.
Like, I mean, so this is just kind of a side note, and I wonder if this is true of hacking. So this is like, I also don't want to like take over. I just have a question related to that.
No, okay, as long as you're, I mean, we've already had
about
people.
track saws? Okay.
Right, exactly.
There is a whole question now about your favorite saw. In case, you have an opinion about that. That was
in case you want to go off track
suggested by the
again.
Greek chorus.
Okay.
That was good.
My question was so one of the things that's super interesting and is a criticism of engineering tests general, or coding tests generally, when you have to like do a coding interview. So John does a lot of coding interviews for people. And one of the problems is that they used to be in person, and you'd have to go and code out on a whiteboard, which is a very kind of unnatural way of coding, and kind of gets like it's like writing out your essay on a whiteboard, like instead of like writing it on a computer. So like, anyways, one of the upsides about like the pandemic is that all like very, very lengthy interview processes have gone into this, like, and now people code live, like using their computers. And so it's like actually been supposedly much more indicative of like how people code and whether people are like kind of just like, because sometimes you could be really good at like, you could get really well practiced at writing on a whiteboard and not be that great a coder, but like, or vice versa, right? But like, so anyways, I just thought it was kind of an interesting.
That's such a good point, because I've had this thing where I've like lost the ability to spell when I'm writing on a whiteboard or a blackboard. Like I remember writing the word both, BOTH, and like and I would say both doesn't sound like a word. Like say it to yourself, both. And so like when you write on a blackboard, it doesn't look like real writing.
Yes,
so I mean,
it's
I
like
think,
why people transpose words like letters all the time, and like totally,
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was thinking that like if you did Ben's idea and did this class, it would also just be a very natural extension of like the skills that people would have to use to interview now. So
that's actually a great point. I mean, so one of the things, let's just talk about, maybe you could just mention to explain to us all, like, how did the class work? Like, like what skills did the class try to teach, and do you think certain things were successful in this endeavor?
So, I think we were very successful. That's for sure. And I'm not saying this for just jokes and fun, but I know of various students we had who really enjoyed it, and some took this further. Actually, kind of used this as a little bit as a jumping off point. And I think also our kind of feedback from students was very good. And I think what really was interesting for us. So we were a team of three, obviously, Scott, Sean O'Brien, who's not here, and myself. And when you start with a group of people where you really cannot assume anything about their knowledge, their skills in technology, and you want to bring them from zero to actually being able to do a little bit of a hack as a final project like Christmas, you really have to think about kind of what do you teach them, how do you tell them about it, and how do you scope the kind of exercises, the difficulty, how do you balance kind of theory with practice? Because some stuff, right, is really interesting, but it's very hard to show in a classroom, particularly to people who, have never looked at, for example, a terminal window before in their lives. So, and I think what we tried to do is we started. Scott was really into this part, so this was mainly him doing that. Talking about the real basics, like what's a processor, right? Like what is kernel space and user space, to really establish that. But we always try to add a little bit of a practical session in the end. So things like, how do you hide a file in your file system? How do you find a file? How can you set permissions so that only your user can do things? And we set these up in a fun way for people. So essentially, files were hidden on their systems, and they could kind of figure out over time a story. I can't remember how it ended. It is a few years ago, but it was essentially we set up this story of people doing stuff, and they could kind of figure it out by kind of following through with the exercises. And then we got more and more advanced. Essentially, one of the projects we did was the what was it called? The pumpkin pie, which involved hacking a Raspberry Pi, so a small computer, that we put into.
Could you just explain what a Raspberry Pi is for those?
Oh yeah,
It's a very transformative tool, and I think a lot of people might not know what it is because it sounds like a dessert.
So,
it really does, yeah.
So I'll go a little bit further than saying it is a small computer. So it's essentially a kind of, as I said, like it's a small computer. It has networking, it has USB, all the kind of creature comforts you would expect. It was created as an educational tool, but you will actually find it now being used by a variety of people for a variety of tasks. Be this be this a little server in their home network, or to control their tools or whatever else. So it actually is much more than an educational tool by now. But for us, this was really useful because the Raspberry Pis are small. They run standard Linux, so pretty easy to deal with. They connect to your home network, and they're cheap. I think right now, probably an up-to-date one is maybe like $80. I'm sure you can get some for cheaper. And so this was really fun because, for example, for this project, we added some LEDs, which you can get online because people do a lot of fun things with the Raspberry Pis. So it had like a kind of fake fire effect for Halloween. And the task the student has was to kind of get into the Raspberry Pi and change the color of the flame. And obviously, I kind of left some documentation on there. So
that's so cute.
Yeah,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, actually, I put the
I
link
just pulled
in
it up. I'm gonna link to it again, Scott, in case people missed it.
Yeah, they actually Boing did a story about
Did
the
Corey
class.
write this up?
Yeah, Corey. Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. He's
Yeah,
so
so-
good at picking out things and highlighting like interesting little projects.
Mhm.
Sorry. This is great. Cool.
Yeah. So it was actually Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lauren, please.
I wanted to just add, if you ever want to do this, Sean, our third person who isn't here, put it on GitHub, so you can just take whatever I did and then just use it for yourself.
So,
Yeah.
So here's the question. How would this course be different if, say, you did it on Crowdcast with a live audience, with the idea that the results would live as a sequence of YouTube videos? I mean, just imagine hypothetically, not like I'm workshopping an idea.
Mm-hmm. Scott, you want to start?
So Actually, no, you go.
Okay, I'll go. So I feel the first thing would be right that the use of Raspberry Pis probably wouldn't be that functional in that case. However, for our second year, we actually moved away from Raspberry Pis to virtual machines. And there are tools where you can run virtual machines locally on your computer. They're for free, right? It's available. And for example, one thing that could be done is to prepare images for people with like the exercises and everything included that they can download and then essentially run a computer virtually on their machine to try out the things. If something breaks, no problem, you just download the image again and you essentially have a fresh computer. So this was actually one of the issues we had when we gave students the Raspberry Pis, because they were extremely good at breaking them. And on a software level, right? So they didn't drop them, but they broke the software or the operating system, and then we had to kind of, take them back in and put it on again, right? Making sure they work. And with the virtual machines, it was much better, because we essentially told them, look, if you break it and it doesn't start anymore, delete the old one, go to whatever solution we used, Canvas, right? Download it again, and it will just work like the first day. So our support calls were really reduced once we moved there. And that's, what I think would be the first step when moving this to YouTube, is to give people the possibility to kind of try these things out on their own machine without the requirement to buy kind of any hardware, and to make it simple so that in case anything goes wrong, like, they have a simple way to restoring it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's right. I think that one of the big challenges is going to be, like it always is in these kinds of classes, which is how to deal with it on the fly. So I really want to mention, and Laurin has mentioned this twice, I want to mention again. So Laurin, Sean O'Brien, who runs the privacy lab at Yale, and we all three developed the course together, and Sean hopefully will be part of this too. But one of the things that was really important when we had the class, and we kept it to 18 people, still anybody was teaching the class, like, we had to like go around the room helping people with some kind of mess up, because things always got messed up. So I think one of the big questions is whether, like, using breakout rooms, for example, like something is wrong with the computer, can you like signal an instructor to go to a breakout room to help fix it? I don't know if those things like will work. We'll just have to see how like, I'm sure it'll be a work in progress. Can I say one thing, which the only thing that kind of worries me about it is just one of the things that is really kind of surprising is how after not that much time, how much trouble you can cause. And that was in some sense kind of scary. So what would happen was, by Christmas time, I mean, they had to start it before Christmas, but for the final project, they had to do 3 different hacks. And they were, there was like a lot of innovative type stuff that people did. They were hacking their own routers. They were trying to hack toasters. They were trying to hack Roombas. They were trying to do a lot of different things, and they were successful at a lot of it. But the thing is that ordinarily level-headed, like super ethical and responsible students, like, had the most harebrained ideas about what they thought that they could do compatible with the law. So they were like saying, for my project, what I'm trying to do is hack my partner's computer at his law firm. And I'm like, no, you may not do that. That is,
first of all, that's a good way to get a divorce.
There's so many bad things. But the thing is, like, it's like if you teach somebody how to use a hammer, they're just going to go around knocking things. And so the problem is, at least with the students, you could say over and over again, like, please, really, this would be a violation of federal law to do this on the internet. Do not do this.
It's a HIPAA violation.
Well, I
was
wouldn't.
like, like those little plastic hammers that you give little babies because they want to smash it into everything.
Right.
This is why you only give them like Raspberry Pis, and then you also control the battery, like the plug, to pull them out of the.
But I figure if we put this on the open internet, if we put like a little kind of notice that say "Do not violate the law,"
I'm sure it'll be fine.
That'll be fine.
That's plenty.
Well, because the Section 230, Section 230 means that you can't be held responsible for anything that happens on the internet.
And the Privileges and Immunities Clause.
Yeah,
and when Section 230 and HIPAA collide, that's like,
you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's bring in. It's time for some audience questions.
Can I take this class from you guys? Could I audit this?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I'm an affiliate at Yale in some weird capacity.
No, we are. John Hawkinson, the floor is yours.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to ask about the wisdom of some of these computer numeric controlled conversions of tools, because when we talk about hacking, and it can mean a lot of things, but for you guys, it seems to sound like it means automation of hardware at a kind of not super complicated level. So I wanted to know, I have a compound miter saw that sits in my basement, and I don't use it a whole lot, but I thought, what if we could do a CNC conversion of it? And it doesn't have many degrees of freedom. I mean, I guess it has 4, and maybe it should get an X table on its regular table, so it could slide the wood. Because if it's just making automatic cuts, I don't know if that's good. But I worry about the safety, especially if anyone other than me might use it. I live in an apartment building, and my basement isn't super secure. So would I have liability problems if some of my neighbors went down and broke into my storage space and tried to use my CNC controlled compound miter saw? So that's really my question.
Yeah.
Lauren?
Lauren.
I'm not the lawyer. Don't ask me.
No. Just I mean, like, there's technical aspects of this question. Should you hack a table saw or a miter saw?
No, a compound miter saw.
Yeah. No, should you hack a compound miter saw and make it CNC controlled?
I mean, I am aware that actually people do this.
People do this. Yeah.
So it sounds extremely cool. So when I move into a house with a basement and I have enough room, I would love to have a Raspberry Pi controlled saw down there. Now, I think that the thing with that is you should make sure that no one apart from you who knows how to deal with this thing is touching it and potentially hurting themselves.
Yeah, maybe password control the on-off switch.
Yeah, and like lock
I don't
the
think
door.
It works like that. I think like you get a lock.
So I want to add something to this point, which is that there is a whole world of awesome CNC controlled tools, and particularly in the router department, people do awesome things with CNC and wood. There is also, I've done some CNC wood burning, which is freaking fabulous. I
assume CNC stands for command and control, or no?
No.
Okay, commander in chief. No.
What does it stand for? It's a protocol.
Cookies and cream.
It's a protocol for three-dimensional sort of vector graphics controlled physical robotics in space. It's the protocol used for 3D printers.
I see.
It's also used for laser engraving. And it's also used for if you imagine a very fast spinning thing that's on a three-dimensional axis, you can cut into wood with it, right? And if it's fine enough, you can do incredibly refined engravings or three-dimensional carvings. I don't remember what it stands for, but here's the thing about it, and I mean, John is, I assume, joking with the question. These are really powerful tools, and they generally involve very sharp blades spinning very quickly. And so actually, if you don't know what you're doing, probably best not to try it. I've always, the story with, remote driving, right, and driverless cars, where it's dramatically safer than operating a car until the moment that it's not, right, is really true of a saw. The human brain and the two human hands are, except Kate's, of course. With Kate's brain is fine, but the hands, she just cuts them a lot. They're actually well-trained humans are still going to be much better at this than AIs.
Yeah, I mean, so to bring this back to hacking, right? The thing is with CNC equipped tools, right? This is one of these things where right, if you do it wrong, you can actually make your CNC kind of cut itself. That is totally possible if you aren't careful. And what
is that
I'm
murder or suicide if that happens? I want
I'm not
from a legal perspective.
Why am I being asked the legal questions? There are lawyers on this call.
The basic principle here is that whenever we have a legal question, we ask Ben. When Ben's on mute, we ask Laurin. No, right? I mean.
Yeah. So what I wanted to get to, right, is that we really have this issue now when we talk about kind of cybersecurity and things like that people do connect their CNC to the internet because, right, I'm upstairs in my living room and I'm cutting some wood downstairs. So I do want to see what's going on and maybe kind of do that. And that's me. But you also have this with the power plant, your local utilities in general. They connect stuff to the internet that really has a direct impact on people's lives. Might this be, right, your water supply and what goes into it, or might this be some critical internet infrastructure that is not immediately related, but that is required to run these processes, and once it goes down, you're in big trouble. So that's, I think, just like as a side note to kind of bring this back to hacking, right? This is why this matters and matters more and more, because there's close to nothing that isn't connected in some way, shape, or form, and therefore vulnerable.
Yeah, I think the big,
really great point.
Yeah, right. I think that it's cybersecurity as being such a huge thing because so many people are connecting their table saws to the internet.
I mean, it's better than like a 13-year-old playing war games. Like, I think. Is it? I don't know.
Until the table saw cuts your hand off because someone hacked your Raspberry Pi.
Right.
Or then like
saws are dangerous.
Or
enough
then
then
you mount it. I got it, guys. We mount a table saw on a self-driving car, and then just like send it down the street. That seems just to see if we can, guys. No, we're just gonna gray hat it. We're just gonna like see if we can do it.
Yeah, I think we need the liability lawyers now.
Just put it. Do it on the film it, put it on the internet. Section 230 will protect you.
Okay,
Yes.
so the show, the Greek chorus is reminding us of BattleBots.
Yes, that is
I
like
just
a
want to
BattleBots
say
episode.
BattleBots was the greatest show
So
ever,
good.
and I really think it should be brought back. Paula,
What? Go ahead.
you
Paul.
never saw BattleBots?
No, I never saw Battle.
Oh, this
Just-
is something you can also learn about from
Yeah,
YouTube.
just go look it up on YouTube.
Lovely.
It's
Okay.
it's a wonderful thing. It's kind
robots.
of like it's basically robots with power tools attacking each other. It's
Okay.
bringing
And it's
together
like-
all the themes of this show.
And they just destroy each other, and then they're just so like, whether you go all defense and make this like basically impenetrable fortress that can't attack anyone, or whether you decide to be like a total like offensive attack monster but makes you very vulnerable to tipping over or like becoming like completely
I
unable
love
to-
that.
My
It's
favorite,
super interesting.
My favorite BattleBot was just a wedge on wheels, and it would
Yes.
ram the other ones and come up underneath them and flip them over.
I
What was
love
the
that.
name of that one?
I don't
loved that one,
remember.
too.
It was awesome. BattleBots
Anyways.
was the greatest show. Paula, the floor is yours. Do you have a table saw question
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
for
Yeah,
our
I have
guest?
two questions. You know, I'm a young person, and I've cut myself several times with a potato peeler. So I'm wondering what kind of saw would be great for someone who doesn't want to spend money on all this furniture for my new apartment, right?
No
Gotta-
saw. No saw. Get
Yeah,
a butter
right.
knife, Paula, and a lot of time on your hands. Just like
So you would be surprised how many woodworkers have lost fingers to
No, I wouldn't.
in particular
That's
table
right, yeah.
saws. They are
Kate wouldn't.
dangerous. So
I'm scared
really,
to death of them.
if you, I would avoid them. They're really scary, actually. You have to imagine you have a spinning blade like this size on top of a table that you're standing in front of, and you're
And that
pushing
you're
stuff
strapped
through.
down on the train tracks as the blade comes down toward you.
And you're just pushing this long thing in, and you're like got a little jig so you can push it all the way in, but like it kind of like starts to like buckle and do something weird, and you're like, oh, I'll just like reach my hand in a little bit further to make sure it stays down. And then you're like, no, that's the trap. Anyways, don't use a table saw. That's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at
It
least
can get
say
more
no.
dangerous.
Yeah, but at
A
least
lot
you
of what
can say.
happens is also kickback. So you actually get hit by the piece you're working on, which is the far more common injury, in fact. Yeah, don't do it.
That's also the issue with the issue with chainsaws as well is kicks.
is that it bucks back.
It bucks back,
Yeah.
but then it's the blade that's bucking, not the target wood.
But
It
if
would-
I gave up a couple of fingers for a couple $100 in a visit to IKEA, would that?
No, this is
No.
the whole beauty of IKEA.
No,
you
just
don't
do
need a
IKEA.
fucking saw for anything unless you really fucked up.
Here's a dirty little secret. Good woodworking is much more expensive than buying furniture.
Right, I guess that's right.
It's because you don't have the economies of scale and all those underpaid workers, and you have to buy the materials and you pay retail for them, and so you think you're going to save money by doing it yourself, but like I'm making this conference table for Lawfare, it would be way cheaper to buy it. And I'm using wood that was downed in my neighborhood in DC. So
and
don't
he's,
think you're
like,
saving.
goes for $9 an hour. So like,
Yeah, exactly.
He's not
And
a
I pay
lawyer.
myself shit.
I know.
So I have a question about hacking, which is how do you keep up? Because it seems to me that to hack well, you actually have to be a little bit ahead of the technology, which is to say you have to understand what they've done and what they haven't done and where the seams are. And they have whole teams of people doing this, and you have to study and be ahead of them. And these fields, both on the hardware side and the software side, are moving super, super fast. So, like, how do you actually stay ahead enough to enough that your sense of where the seams are accurate in a timely fashion.
Hmm.
You're the guest, Laurin.
Okay, so I will start. So I will answer in a weird way. So one of the things I work on right now, and I write quite a bit about, is exactly the complexity problem, right? And the issue is that essentially the way we do things right now, you essentially cannot. It is far too specialized in this space to really have, like deep insights into all the required kind of areas of the technology stack, and more so kind of the technology network, right? Because we're not just building stuff kind of on top of hardware anymore, but we're using complicated cloud products, pulling data and services from a variety of places. So essentially it is getting harder to kind of know about everything that is going on. It was always hard. But now we're getting to the point where our architectures are hard to understand. We were just at a talk, Scott and I, yesterday or the day before, I'm not 100% sure, where some researchers talked about AWS and how they could read from virtual machines in AWS using tools provided by Amazon. So they, because what Amazon did there was that they did not limit what certain services they offered could access. So the assumption by the people owning these buckets, users, whatever, was that this was private. This was limited to their own kind of, services, their own systems, if you will. However, what actually happened is that some of these services worked globally, and people were not aware that this was the case. And this is one of these examples where it's not even just about technology, but it is really about how did, for example, my cloud hoster set up these systems. And they change things all the time. So you have to kind of keep track of everything that's going on in this space. So you have a cloud vendor, you have hardware running, you have operating systems running, right? Everything is moving, all the goalposts are shifting, and you're kind of unable to kind of follow all of this, which I think will become a bigger issue. As I said, I'm writing on this quite a bit right now.
Yeah, well, one of the things that, so what Laurin is pointing out here is, so the talk that we were at, so like, let's say you have a couple of accounts on the cloud that let's say you rented Amazon's cloud services, AWS, Amazon Web Services, and you have a bunch of these accounts that you're running on the cloud. And AWS, Amazon provides you this service called CloudTrail that goes and it tells you what your accounts are doing. And one of the things that the presenter showed was that the permissions that were given to CloudTrail was that it could read and write to various accounts, but didn't say who could do it. So basically anybody could do it. So one of the things I think that Laurin is pointing out is that not only is it like it's getting super hard for hackers to like know the technology themselves, it's like getting super hard for Amazon to actually make the services that they're making in a way where actually you're the only one who can control your account. So it's like things are so complicated that even the cloud designers, cloud engineers can't even do things correctly. And it's actually a huge problem, as they were showing, is that there's like misconfigurations all over the cloud. And so lots of times people think, and for good reason, that like they should use the cloud because the cloud is really the people who are managing the cloud, like they do security. That's their job, and so they're really good at this. It just so happens that it's so complicated that they're misconfiguring these things for everybody as well. So that's kind of interesting.
David Botts, who has been Aliced.
Speaking of, where's Alice been lately? Has anyone
Alice
seen Alice?
has abandoned us, I think. Alice, if you're out there,
We miss you. I'll text
we
her.
miss you. Come back.
David,
walk
you're
it-
wonderful,
walk into the
wonderful
light.
stand-in
But-
for Alice.
But we love David Botts too. And David, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. This is super interesting, and really glad, Scott. I'm not going to ask you how you feel about being in Las Vegas. That would be wrong. So I'll ask you about how you feel about,
that would be a HIPAA violation.
right. So how do you feel about being on Pacific time?
Again, you said, how do you feel? That's a HIPAA violation.
Okay. So I've gone too far. All right.
No. I think
Yeah.
the way to do it. First of all, you can't ask questions about anything about how you feel. You
Right,
say,
so you can't do that.
you have reflections on being in Pacific time?
I think that's I'll let that go because it's Friday, and it's cheese night in
Ish.
theory, ish. So I'll let that go. I will say that I am still on Eastern Coast time, so I went to sleep at like 8:30 last night, and I keep on getting up at 4:30 in the morning.
I would just point out that if we had Universal Time, we
Shut
wouldn't
up,
have to
Ben.
be making all these kinds of references.
Yeah.
That doesn't
All right.
make any sense. Okay, sorry.
So, Laurin, you've been a fabulous guest. In spite of all of the circumstances that you are now in, what are your thoughts about how integrated circuits and internet connectivity have created additional vulnerabilities, up to and including power tools? And I've got a great example of
right.
a power tool problem.
And now we're talking.
Yeah.
So essentially, I think one aspect that I kind of talked already, right, is this complexity aspect, right? You connect more and more stuff. It gets harder and harder to actually figure out what is where, what is doing what is talking to what, who is in control of what, right? Who can patch it, maybe. Who knows? So that's definitely one. The other part is that a lot of the kind of IoT systems, I'll just call it, right? We have power limitations, but more so, we just usually want really cheap hardware, which means it's often hard to really include security properly. And it's even harder to patch some of this stuff. So if it's vulnerable, it will stay vulnerable. And as we know, a lot of these things will connect to the open internet, which means, well, this is now open for botnets. This is now open for some form of exploitation in general. And the danger really, again, coming back to complexity, is when you have that and everything is talking, it gets harder and harder to kind of figure out what is kind of okay and what isn't. And now talking about power tools. So there are a variety of vendors that will let you connect to your power tools via Bluetooth, for example. So Bosch Professional, the blue ones, you can connect with your phone via Bluetooth to your tools. So just as an example, right?
Russian
Imagine
interference in the woodworking of
Exactly.
general contracting.
Yeah, think about this. You have a senator who loves woodworking, and then their table saw is getting hacked while they're building a boat in their basement, and it does something, and it's successful. I mean, this sounds completely crazy, yes, but at the same time, considering what we're doing and what we're connecting, it might not be as crazy in a few years from now.
But like, really briefly, like, can I just say that that's not anything new about modern technology generally, which is there's a trade-off between connectivity and convenience and safety and vulnerability. Like, this is true of like if you allow your browser to save your password, you don't have to type your password in every time. But it means that also, like, if anyone ever takes your computer and wants to get into your email, they can get into your email if they have your computer. Like, it's not like that's one example, but basically, like, the idea being that if there's some type of way to connect various devices, it means that it is another portal in which to exploit for, like, a safety or a vulnerability measure, and that, like, the more you add to those, or you create you remove friction around those connectivities, like by enabling Bluetooth versus a cord, right? Or something physical, then you're going to have like different types of security vulnerabilities, and they're going to increase, in my opinion.
But can you identify a general rule? Like, I cannot imagine a good reason for a thermostat to be internet connected.
Sure, there is. There's tons of good reasons for a thermostat to be internet connected.
Like,
you're traveling, and you have things like you live in an area with, like, a lot of very up and down kind of.
Isn't that what neighbors are for?
Yeah, but people don't always have neighbors,
Turn
Ben.
on
Like,
my
some people
heat
live
so
like
that my pipes don't freeze.
No. That's not, like, I'm sorry, that's, like, actually, like, a lot of people don't have good neighbors that they can trust to do that. I mean, I've never spoken to my neighbors, and I've lived in this building for 12 years, and they're, like, 5 feet that way. So there's, like, I'm just kidding. I know my neighbor. We're very,
okay.
Very, like, sweet,
let me frame it a different way. Can you identify a heuristic rule that identifies when something, big or small, is too critical to connect? So, like, okay, I'll accept Kate's point. She can identify circumstances that a thermostat should be internet connected. But I look at my house and I say, I don't really want the Russians to be able to control the temperature in my house. And when, like, there has to be a kind of mental algorithm that we can use.
Why do you think the Russians would try to control the temperature in your house? Why do you think they give, like, a flying fuck what the temperature is in your house?
I wouldn't have thought that 10 GOP was would have been a good idea for the Russians either, but they did that. And I just don't think the added convenience of having a toaster that, I can say, from my bedroom, time to make toast now, is worth the value of having somebody able to say, time to burn down Ben's house now, heat up, for as much as you possibly can.
So I just want to jump in, right? Quick point on the last thing, right? It's not necessarily that you are hurt by it, but others and society might. So, for example, your smart thermostat, if it's badly secured, might be taken over by a botnet, might be used for a variety of phishing, scams, whatever else, and that is not hard to do in a lot of cases. So there is that aspect. But I wanted to come back to the saving password. Indeed, if you use Firefox, that browser as a kind of password saving feature has been externally audited. So in fact, if you use a very strong password for that and you save things in your browser, you will probably be better off than typing it in particular, if you use random number generation on these passwords. So you only remember one very complicated passphrase. Go to XKCD for examples how to do this. And then you just use random numbers for all your accounts. Your browser will remember it. They will be encrypted. So if someone steals your laptop without your very long and complicated passphrase, that's very important, obviously, when you're securing dozens of passwords, it will be very hard for an attacker to do this. Even better, use something like KeyPass my favorite password manager because
Or
it
1Pass.
runs locally. I am not a fan. I'm just saying of the services. I would say, right, it's much better than remembering, right, and using something that is easily doable, or reusing passwords. For passwords, I like to stay local. That's why I recommend KeePass. Usually, right, you'll be fine with any of the commercial options too. Don't get me wrong. Just my personal preference. So I just wanted to say that regarding the passwords, you might be better off actually saving and kind of use random things there that are not reused, because that is one of the key ways that attackers actually get to your passwords, right? They look at the kind of password you have on one site that got breached, and then they have your email address, right, or whatever you use to log in, right, plus a password you use elsewhere. It's probably reused because humans do not remember things like that very well. So then you'll have it somewhere else in there in your next account. Also, for anything that matters, and I will end the security advice there, enable two-factor authentication, and preferably not something that uses text messages or SMS. Use security keys, or at least the systems where it generates codes on your phone that you then type in, so that the OTP stuff. So that's my recommendations on that. Sorry for jumping in, but I thought it was important to underline this.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up, David Botts, you said you had a great example of your point, and then we started answering your question before you had a chance to give it. So give your example.
Well, thanks. So there's a security researcher named Monte Elkins, and I put it into the chat. He took a drill with integrated circuits, and he reprogrammed it so that it can play the theme from Darth Vader and Star Wars in a drill, because all of these things with integrated circuits, it's all programmable. And so even if it is not literally connected to the internet or connected via Bluetooth or what have you, so many of these things run on software. Software is written by humans. Humans are imperfect, and software can also be changed. So life can be super interesting with programmable logic controllers in power tools.
So on that note, I've got good news and bad news for you. I'm going to give you the bad news first. The first bit of bad news is that we are out of time and we got to wrap up. The second bit of bad news is your power tools are not safe. The hackers are coming for your power tools.
Yeah.
But here's the good bit of news. Scott and I hope Laurin are going to teach the hacking course on Lawfare Live.
So cool.
We're going to create a set of videos so that you too can be one of the people that hacks the power tools, in addition to one of the people who gets your power tools hacked. You can't actually do anything about that. But I do think power tools security is the future, and we all have to start working on it.
No, that's right. I mean, our motto for the class is be part of the problem.
Exactly.
Right, if the Russians hack
either
your
a
thermostat,
perpetrator or a victim be.
So, I mean, that's the thing. If the Russians hack your thermostat and it's getting really cold in winter, you can get back at them by hacking power tools, so they'll be really annoyed all the time.
Right, or by turning up your thermostat to the desirable level.
It is their track tools, track saw, that they think it's going to cut a perfect joint over a long distance, and it's going to be, just because of your intervention, like a fraction of a degree, a few degrees off, so that when they put the two pieces of wood together, there'll be this annoying gap. And all the wood putty in the world will not fix a 5-degree off angle. And so that's what we're aspiring to here. Fuck up the Internet Research Agency's power tools. We are gonna leave it there. Laurin, I don't know what nationality you are, but I was going to say, we usually say you're a great American to our guests, but I don't really know if you are American. You're a great temporary resident of Las
You
Vegas.
seem suspicious.
Very suspicious.
We will be back on Monday. I don't know who our guest is going to be.
I do.
You do?
Oh.
Yes, I have the entire week booked. It's John Q. Barrett on Monday.
Oh, well, John Q. Barrett will be joining us. I'm sure we'll be talking about some combination of Justice Jackson, the history of special and independent investigations of presidents, and other cool stuff. That'll be 70 hours and 51 minutes from now. And until then, Kate?
We're not allowed to have fun anymore. But we are allowed to still buy axes from Amazon, and they'll get shipped right to your door, and you don't have to plug them in or anything. And they do all of the hard work of saws, and they're not hackable. They only hack.
It's true.
So.
There is an unhackable non-power tool, which is the old, handsaw kind of thing. It's really hard to hack.
The Japanese ones.
Yeah, the Japanese ones
also
are really
hard to
cool. They're push
Speaking
saws.
of hazardous,
when you push the wood down the table saw, do you say, "No, Mr. Bond, I want you to die"? So
I'm going to do that from now on.
It is.
It's what's going to happen.
There is always a our hero is on the tracks, and the saw is coming for him thing going when you use a table saw. Just always.
Okay.
So I have to say, I'm hoping I'll be re-invited for when the whole session is just on power tools or woodworking.
Oh my gosh,
We're totally doing that.
We should do that with Josh Marshall, actually, because Josh Marshall makes all of his own hand tools. Like, he makes his own.
Yeah, no, that's a whole next level shit.
Wow.
Okay, but Ben feels this is threatening to
that
Ben's
makes me
masculinity
feel
in some
that
way.
makes me feel really inadequate.
So we can't do it.
No, it's not a masculinity thing. I feel that way about anybody who does something that I do. I feel that way about people who write, using ink, and write really well, but they do it all, with pen and paper. There's just something about the sort of really OG forms of any art that put to shame the people who do it using all of these technological advances that.
Yeah. I have that feeling about commercially made cheese. Yeah.
Oh, don't say that. You'll get there. I mean, you made your own Chev /
But you didn't grow the cow or the goat.
Yeah, no, but I am grinding my own wheat. So
yeah. So, but you didn't grow it.
No, but I did. So that's fine.
We will see.